Hey, what's good, self-direct investors? I hope you're all doing great, and I want to welcome you back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Jordan. I'm the mind behind Make More Capital, and today we're coming at you with This Week in Cannabis news from October 31st to November 6th. Now, before we jump in, if you enjoy this video or you learned something, please just leave a like on it as it really helps out my channel. And of course, if you want to learn how to take advantage of this generational investment opportunity, subscribe below so that you don't miss any future videos, and then there's plenty of content for you to go back, rewatch, and educate yourself with. I've tried to put all the news and facts in one place so that you can watch episodes over time to learn about the evolution of the industry, identify top companies that you keep seeing pop up, and take advantage whenever you feel ready if you wish to do so. We're going to start with the surprise flash report from Canna because I wasn't expecting this, but happy to recap, as apparently Halloween weekend cannabis sales totaled 249.6 million. So give or take over 4 days, 250 million, not bad. Americans like their cannabis. As cannabis sales over Halloween weekend were 6% more than last year, which we love to see, as Halloween weekend has historically earned a place as one of the top 10 cannabis sales days, and thus far, the Friday before Halloween remains in the running for one of the top 10 days for 2022. And so a bit more information on the sales breakdown from Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and Monday, and then a little bit more on Canna here if you just want to pause to read. Otherwise, the link is below. So with that, on to some other news. Nats Fertig, who writes for Politico, covering cannabis, she shares this new development as Senator Hick to intro Rep. Dave Joyce's Prepare Act in the Senate, which would require the Biden admin to create a task force to form a regulatory framework for cannabis. It wouldn't legalize cannabis. Yeah, no thanks. So I'm going to put this link below. And regardless, they think this is progress. This is just more, stalling. Unfortunately, I think most people will see through this. And obviously, descheduling is just the answer, or possibly Safe Plus is the incremental solution in the near term. We don't know, but we just don't like to necessarily see this, and regardless, just sharing the news. Let's hope this doesn't gain much traction, or the Dems have some other plans up their sleeve, especially in the lame duck session. But so you can pause to read for a little bit more about what they would plan to do with this Prepare Act. We need less preparing and more action. But with that, Green Thumb starts the MSO earnings off with a bang as they report their third quarter 2022 results. I'm just going to share the highlights quickly, but I do have some snippets from investment firms that dive a bit deeper in, just because obviously they have the training in finance and I don't. But just to highlight, for the third quarter, 9 months ended September 30th, 2022, revenue increased 3% sequentially and 12% year over year to 261 million. So you would probably think that there'd be a little bit more sequential growth because of New Jersey launching, but obviously with a limited number of legal dispensaries and outlets, to supply the demand, they can only grow so much. But no doubt, better to have that access and exposure than not. Year to date, 2022 revenue increased 17% to 758 million compared to the first 9 months of 2021. Ninth consecutive quarter of positive GAAP net income, delivering 10 million or 4 cents per basic and diluted share, with adjusted operating EBITDA grew 7% sequentially to 84 million or 32% of revenue, while cash flow from operations came in at 48 million net of income tax payments of 31 million for the quarter. And so from my best understanding, I believe that they brought 48 million after paying their taxes based on how that is said, but I could be wrong, so do let me know in the comments. But that is basically just the summary highlights of the Green Thumb's third quarter. So love to see Green Thumb started off well. Of course, one of the more fundamentally sound MSOs. And so with that, thank you, Dennis Ruda, for sharing these. Green Thumb, heads down and thumbs up. Strong execution leads to top line and margin beat. And so this is from Needham. Decent play among top MSOs indeed. So again, this is not advice, but just sharing you the information as we get it. And so you can pause to read and take this in with what you already know and hopefully make better investment decisions. So you can pause to read what they had to say about it, and then at a glance, their investment thesis going forward. And so a lot of great information for free. Love to be able to get this. So thank you, Dennis, again for sharing. And then we got this one from Better Than Expected, again, thanks to New Jersey, of course. Short notice by Cowen. So again, thank you, Dennis, for sharing this. And so this is what Cowen has to say on the recent development. So you can pause to read. And then the next one here, pause to read if you like. And then that is the last one, pause to read here as well. And so with that, we're just going to carry on with the investment snippets. But I'm pretty sure we just saw this one, and it seems as if the first one from the last 3 slides was from Roth, and so this is exactly what you just saw there, so you can pause to read again if you didn't, while the second and the third one from the last bit were Cowen. So my apologies, I just noticed that now, but we're going to carry on. And so ATB on U.S. cannabis, so thanks, Todd, for sharing this one. The broader MSO group is currently trading at a 7.1x 2023 multiple. Not exactly sure which multiple that is, but versus tobacco peers at 9.5x, alcohol at 11.4x, and CBG at 15.9x, that would appear to be somewhat of a discount, especially considering the growth that the MSOs are going to see versus tobacco, alcohol, and CPG, which are seeing less growth over time versus MSOs, especially as states organically reform their laws. And so you can pause to read U.S. multi-state operators Q3 2022 preview, metal testing, base forming. And so this is what ATB has to say on U.S. cannabis. So with that, BTIG on U.S. cannabis talking about election day. And of course, no one knows what is going to happen. So plan accordingly for your own situation. But here's more information that you can take in. State market opportunities with midterms. Of course, we are looking for cannabis to win another election, as they typically do. And that does start the cannabis season. At least we've seen that in the past, and hopefully that trend will carry forward. And so you can pause to read what BTIG has to say about the upcoming elections and their thoughts. Again, speculation though, take it with a grain of salt. With this one, thanks Todd for sharing Hedgeye on U.S. cannabis as well. New best idea long, MSOS. We are adding advisor shares pure U.S. cannabis ETF MSOS as a Hedgeye cannabis best idea long. So you can pause to read a little bit more on that. But so with that, carry on to the MSO news, as we got some big news, unexpected as well, before the weekend. Cresco Labs and Columbia Care to sell cannabis assets in 3 states to Sean Diddy Combs. And so it's a great reminder of how good of a marketer that Sean Combs is when we think back about his career. He's been building brands for a long time with Bad Boy, with Ciroc, with Sean John, probably numerous others that I can't think of off the top of the dome, but would love to see this, as hopefully he can bring some expertise to this industry and bring more awareness as well. Cresco Labs and Columbia Care announced planned divestiture in 3 markets to Sean Diddy Combs, creating the first minority-owned, vertically integrated multi-state cannabis operator. And this also does, the perception of this story bodes very well for Sean Combs, so of course he does want to champion this, as Combs' proposed acquisition will create the largest black-owned cannabis company in the world and affirms his commitment to economic inclusion of underrepresented groups in cannabis, and the agreement to sell New York, Illinois, and Massachusetts assets marks a major step towards closing Cresco Labs' acquisition of Columbia Care. And so the transaction is expected to close concurrently with the closing of the Columbia Care acquisition. Total consideration for the transaction is an amount up to $185 million, and so far less than I might have anticipated previously when markets weren't as in the dumps as they are now, and obviously thinking that a large portion of some of these licenses could pay off the price that Cresco paid for Columbia Care. Now, obviously, things are different now, but still good to see them selling a large portion of their assets. They still have other assets in other states that Cresco will need to sell, and Columbia Care too, I think, but you know, a huge first step for them. And so a little bit more information here from Charles Bachtel if you want to pause to read. But again, as Cresco sort of quietly operates, I do love when they make these moves out of nowhere and seem to be, you know, good positive steps for the company as well as a whole. And so you can pause to read a little bit more on what Sean Combs has to say. And then, of course, you can grab the link below if you wanted to read through the whole thing yourself, but just want to try and share you the snippets and what you need to know. But in terms of the transaction, essentially, they got some assets in New York, Massachusetts, and Illinois. And so a good amount. Obviously, this helps Cresco and Columbia Care by shedding some weight that they don't need. They get some money, and I think this is much bigger, especially for Sean Combs, who hopefully will be a lot more involved because he seems to be putting his own money down versus Jay-Z, who sort of just used his name with Graham, to get stock options and whatnot. And so, hopefully he'll be a lot more involved in this. And then so it's approximately 110 million cash, approximately 45 million of seller notes. And so at least some of this is in cash. So yeah, Diddy's putting his money where his mouth is and getting back and getting into the cannabis industry. Love to see it. And so just wanted to share this article from the Wall Street Journal on the same story. So you can grab the link below if you wanted to check it out. But love to see this getting awareness out there as it should, as Sean Diddy Combs to buy cannabis operations in New York, 2 other states for up to 185 million. And then we do see the names Cresco Labs and Columbia Care. And so we'd love to see more awareness, but hopefully this is just the beginning. And so wanted to share, actually, before we get to that one, I wanted to share this one. But so thank you, B-Funk, for sharing this, because I hadn't necessarily thought this through, but it does make a lot of sense. And this is still just speculation, sharing my thoughts, but let me know in the comments. He brings up a good point, though. Does Diddy care about social equity? Yes. And of course, the perception is going to make him look better to a large amount of people, but don't think for a second he doesn't care more about his success in building an empire, which is 100% true. Got to be selfish in order to be selfless. He isn't putting down 185 million today if he doesn't have assurances banking gets fixed soon. In the words of Schmuck Schumer, all these developments recently aren't coincidental. And you'd have to think that Diddy and his team have done the due diligence necessary in order to know that they're going to make a return on their investment here, and that this isn't a long shot, especially in the environment of New York, Massachusetts, and Illinois, all heavily, drenched in social equity. And so we don't know how this is going to play out, but just wanted to share this take because I found it very interesting. And so with that, Verano launches Bits, company's new low-dose, high-function edibles. And so beginning November 4th, 2022, so as of yesterday, the new product line from Verano will be available across the company's Zen Leaf dispensaries and third-party retail locations in 6 core markets: Illinois, Maryland, Massachusetts, Nevada, New Jersey, and Ohio, with additional rollouts in Arizona and Florida expected in the near future. And so designed with function in mind, Bits aims to enhance everyday experiences by tapping into the many benefits of cannabis and adaptogens. Bits' novel product profiles include yuzu zone, elderberry wellness, pomegranate R&R, acai affection, and guava go. So a bit more information if you want to pause to read. Links below, or the link is below if you want to check it out. And so with that, just wanted to share this from Curaleaf IR. While I do not own a position in Curaleaf, I do respect Boris Jordan and the work he does there, and as he gets on Twitter sometimes and shares with us. But I just wanted to share this as they are addressing apparently a lawsuit that they are going through, and kudos to Curaleaf for actually addressing this as opposed to not saying anything and leaving shareholders in the dark. And so as I don't own a position, I don't know a whole lot about it, but you can grab the link below if you wanted to read through the whole thing. I'm just going to share the top bit, though. To our valued shareholders, below is our response to the ongoing litigation involving Nitin, Canna, and Sentia Wellness. The case has not been dismissed. It continues to move forward. And actually, well, while you're here, I'm not going to make you grab the link. It's all right here, really, if you want to pause to read. So if you happen to own Curaleaf, definitely nice to see this than not. And you best know that Boris Jordan has experienced in all this, most likely, and he'll be able to handle this as best as any operator really could. And so with that, thanks Todd Harrison for sharing some state news. District of Columbia mayor signs legislation raising cannabis possession limits for patients, which is a big win. So basically anyone in DC can register as a medical patient, and then therefore they can get access to cannabis. And if they're raising the possession limits, that's a win-win for all. You can buy more. Providing access to non-residents as well, as we know that they've made this rule not just for the residents of DC, but also anyone visiting DC, which is pretty awesome. Sign up as a medical patient and you get access to cannabis. So far, there's over 22,000 DC residents legally authorized to access medical cannabis. And so this is from an article from normal.com, link below if you wanted to read more through it. But with that, Office of Medical Cannabis Use looking at Florida for this past week from October 31st to November 4th, and we see one MSO, the Flowery, opened a new location in Verano. And with that, we see the qualified patient count did increase this week to 764,432, which represents an increase week over week of 2,459. So that number is going back up, which we do love to see, as more Floridians are choosing a safer, non-addictive alternative to opioids. And with that, if we scroll down, we can see dispensations for October 28th to November 3rd. We see all the MSOs listed that have operations in the states, the number of dispensary locations they have in operation. Plus, we can see the number of milligrams of THC sold, milligrams of CBD sold, and ounces of smokable flower for all the MSOs across the state. So you can keep track of this week over week as the Office of Medical Cannabis Use in Florida does put this out. But of course, thank you, Pierre Gilles, for this Florida flower market share comp sheet, as he does update this every week. And so he highlights the top 8 MSOs by market share, and this was as of November 4th. So as of yesterday, and we got Trulieve still, of course, number 1, Curaleaf number 2, Air Wellness at number 3, and Verano at number 4, Sortera Wellness number 5, Grow Healthy number 6, Fluent, and then Sunnyside at number 8, sneaking up in there. So love to see that. But of course, grab this below. You can keep track. It's a great resource if you happen to be on Twitter as well. And so with that, wanted to share some New York news, as we got one development. Thanks Jeremy Burke, who writes for Business Insider Trading, sharing Axel Barnaby of the New York State Cannabis, what does he have? Office of Cannabis Management, says they'll be announcing the first CAURD license winner soon, but it won't be all 150. And so while it's unfortunate it won't be the all 150, this was the acronym made for those harmed by the war on drugs that get access to licenses before everyone else, from my understanding. And so this is a positive development, which we do like to see. It seems like New York is getting the ball rolling on some things, but I also wanted to share this interesting one from Syracuse.com. As New York's $200 million cannabis fund, Weber and Willis, two of the managers of that fund, may hold serious conflicts of interest. And so, of course, as people find this out and point it out, it's worth talking about it, because if you can't talk about it, that's not a good sign. And so New York Cannabis Insider has learned that the two high-profile individuals selected to manage a $200 million state cannabis fund may hold significant conflicts of interest that could place New York's social equity-focused rollout in precarious ethical waters. Who would have thought, eh? How hilarious. And so in June, Kathy Hochul announced NBA Hall of Famer Chris Webber and entrepreneur Levetta Willis were selected as part of a team to manage the state's social equity cannabis investment fund. So I don't believe it's just them two. There is a full team, so there are more than just two involved, but their management will entail managing the funds and will pay for the build-out of New York's first 150 retail dispensaries. And from my understanding, this would have been the first 150 that are supposed to be announced in the coming weeks, or hopefully sooner than later. Now, what's gone unmentioned, though, by state officials, however, that's not a good sign, regulators, is that Weber and Willis have strong financial ties to the major global cannabis brand Cookies, including a partnership between Weber, Willis, and Cookies U on a $50 million cannabis training facility in Detroit. And so we're going to stop that sentence there. It should be a period instead of a comma, but a conflict of interest is a conflict of interest regardless of your skin color. And while this might not be illegal, it is something the regulators should have probably mentioned, as in addition to a deal in which Cookies dispensaries in Michigan will carry the duo's player-only branded weed, an announcement made in August after the two were selected as fund managers. And so imagine they applied what's happening in Michigan into New York so that they can sell cookies first as opposed to other. It's again just something that should have been disclosed. In short, Weber and Willis are tasked with raising funds for dispensaries that will compete with their own financial interests if Cookies gets a license to sell rec cannabis in New York. And we know that humans are irrational. They typically work in their own best interests. And so there's a bit more information here. In the spirit of transparency, it's something that should have definitely been disclosed. She said, and this is Frederica Easley, Director of Strategic Initiatives at the People's Ecosystem and co-chair of New York and Hudson Valley Cannabis Industry Association's Social Equity Committee, yada, yada, yada. So a lot more information on here, and it does also cover the selection process and how this happened, but I'm not going to cover the whole story because it'll take too long. So you can grab the link below if you wanted to check it out. But interesting nonetheless, as we keep finding out more about social equity behind the veil as we keep digging. And with that, just sharing, thank you, Jungle Java. With this, legalizing cannabis would generate an additional $50 million in state tax revenues, and this is for Hawaii. And so thank you, Hawaii News Now, for sharing a little bit of cannabis awareness. As of September 30th, there are about 33,725 medical patients in Hawaii who have medical cannabis cards, but of course legalizing for rec would be huge for all the residents, and also tourism. That would be a big boom, I'd like to imagine. And with that, Todd Harrison shares some Kansas news as Kansas split on issues except for medical cannabis, and so it's a good sign. I don't believe Kansas has this question on the ballot, but hopefully lawmakers are working in the best interests of their citizens, as the majority of Kansans want to legalize medical cannabis, with 61% of voters supporting the bill and 25% of voters opposing it. And so that is a clear margin that people want access to a safer, non-addictive medicinal alternative. And with that, just wanted to share this new one from mugglehead.com. Not necessarily sharing anything we don't already know, but Germany has officially apparently unveiled plans to legalize adult use cannabis, as the nation is set to be the second in Europe to permit the use of recreational pot, as I believe Switzerland with their pilot program might have been the first technically. But so as we know, we've gotten a lot of German press releases and then the German government saying like, yeah, that's not accurate at all. But I just wanted to share this because it seems that the German government has announced plans officially on Wednesday to legalize cannabis, a course of action that Chancellor Olaf Scholz's government said would establish the country as a leading European nation for pot legalization. As the health minister, Karl Lauterbach, presented a cornerstone paper to the government outlining steps to introduce a controlled sale of cannabis to adults for rec purposes. And the health minister did not offer a timeline for the proposed plan, of course, but we're thinking introduce it 2022, get it past 2023, launch 2024, best case scenario most likely, but it would allow adults to purchase and possess 20 to 30 grams of cannabis and cultivate up to 3 plants for personal consumption. So it's definitely a win for the people of Germany. Not going to go through the whole thing because that's essentially, it's highlighting what we already know, but it seems like he's officially unveiled it in government and they're getting the ball rolling. So you can pause to read, otherwise you can grab the link below. So a few more stories just to highlight. So thank you, Matt Lemairs, who writes for MJ Biz Daily, for sharing just a few interesting stats out of the Canadian market, as Village Farms International, Pure Sun Farms, top-selling brand in Ontario, is now the clear #1 cannabis producer in Canada provinces by sales per BMO and Hi-Fire data. And so Pure's #2 is Tilray. So that's a good sign, at least, with in terms of, having some market share maintained in Canada while getting exposure to Germany. Hexo's spectacular falls continues. It's now #3. And they were boosted by buying Redecan, but unfortunately it seems like they can't keep that going. Decibel CC, no idea who that is, but they've jumped to #4, while Canopy has tumbled all the way down to #7. And so pretty ugly. But this, again, comes from Hi-Fire data. And so you can pause to read all the Canadian LPs listed down here and then represented by color. This is share price over time, or market share, not share price, market share over time. And with that, we've also got this one, just an interesting fun fact. So thanks, Matt Lemairs again. Illicit cannabis sales in Canada fell to a 40-year low in Q2 of this year, an estimated $610 million in sales, according to StatsCan, because there are legal access points and people are willing to buy legally, so they know what they're getting. They can buy decent product as opposed to turning to the black market. And obviously, all you can do is try and offset that as much as possible, and that's a much better way of bringing in tax revenue, legalizing cannabis, than, let's say, printing a shit ton of money and causing inflation and getting into the mess we are now. And so the last time illicit sales were at this level was in Q3 of 1982. And so despite all the ups and downs, I'd say good job, Canada. We do love to see this, and this does highlight that the war on drugs was a complete failure. We ought to end prohibition, start launching legal markets, regulating, at least with cannabis to start. But you can pause to read. And then the last few stories, interesting one from the American Dental Association is half of dentists say patients are high at dental appointments. Yeah, because no one fucking likes going to the dentist, and going to the dentist is better after smoking cannabis. It's just a fact. So cannabis use may affect oral health and treatment for immediate release. Well, it seems like the ADA wants people to know this, and what can we do to maybe research this better and find out whether cannabis before the dentist is good or bad? Deschedule the damn plant. And so glad to see them raising awareness to the reality of, people using this medicine, especially before they go into a painful dentist appointment. But regardless, just found this interesting. More on it, you can pause to read, but the whole link will be below. And lastly, just to round this off, a reminder from Joe Greisler that we've got a few busy weeks ahead of us. And the trend will continue on November 7th with Curaleaf reporting aftermarket close at 5 p.m. And then November 8th, 9th, 10th, 14th, and 15th. We've got all these MSOs and a few Canadian LPs in here, Village Farms and Canopy Growth. They snuck in, but definitely going to be a busy week reporting and sharing these results. And while they're not going to be as good as we would have thought had New Jersey launched sooner, or, states gotten their head out of their asses and reformed their laws, these companies are doing a fairly good job with both hands tied behind their backs. The future is bright, and just happy to see. Hopefully we'll get some momentum as we move through, and the election is crazy. It's next week. That is it for today's episode, folks. I want to thank you so much for tuning in, and I really hope you got some value out of it. What did you think about the stories mentioned? Let me know in the comments if you have any questions or suggestions, and I'd be happy to address them. But besides that, if you enjoyed this video and you learned something, please just leave a like on it. Subscribe below if you don't want to miss any future videos, and I will catch you on Wednesday for a midweek update. Have a great weekend, everybody.